Hi, this is Frid from The Joy of Syntax and English in Color. One of my YouTube followers asked me to make a video about prepositions. And so I did. And I wanted to, I'll just go ahead and share my screen and get down to business. Hang on. Okay. We'll see. Okay. Prepositions and prep phrases. Before I start on prepositions, I want to remind you that I did a video on word classes. Preposition is a category that's part of a bigger categorization system called word classes. Most dictionaries that we use nowadays use these categories. And, although they differ sometimes with regard to some details, all of them use the categories that I listed here: nouns, pronouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. So if you're not familiar with word classes, please review them by watching my video. You can stop the video here and just read up what I say on this slide. Hang on, maybe I should actually put on the slideshow there. Okay. I explain on this slide all the meanings of the words that are used for these categories, and that's actually very helpful. But for now, we want to focus on prepositions. They're here. And prepositions without context don't make much sense, so we'll rush and find some example sentences. But before I start, I would like you to also remember that there's a difference between word classes and clause elements. I've also made a few videos about clause elements. Clause elements are functional units contained in a sentence. When we look at a sentence, we can analyze it in terms of the words that are contained in it, but that doesn't actually make much sense when we want to understand sentences. We need to understand how the words function to make meaning. And for that, we need an understanding of clause elements. So if you don't have an understanding of clause elements, please go to my video on clause elements. Okay, let's recap what preposition means. It comes from a word, a Latin word meaning preponere. Ponere is to put and to set and to place. And pre means in front of, before. Prepositions are words that are placed in front of nouns and then help us to understand the relationship that these nouns have to the rest of the sentence. Now, there are prepositions that really govern spatial relationships. Like you see here, we have a box and things can be on the box or inside the box or under the box or beside the box. And then we can put things into the box or take things out of the box. So those are really spatial relationships that are made clear with the help of prepositions. But of course, we often use prepositions in a figurative sense, in an abstract sense. For instance, we talked about the book. About is a preposition, and the book is the noun phrase following the preposition. About the book is the prepositional phrase, and it's governed by the verb to talk. I'm interested in English grammar. In English grammar is a prepositional phrase. In is the preposition, English grammar is the noun phrase. And this governs, and the prepositional phrase is governed by the verb, by the adjective here, interested. I am interested in English grammar. Of course, the adjective interested is made from a verb, but it's used as an adjective here. We watch Max stumble along in a fog of confusion and denial. In a fog of confusion. Now, in a fog could be concrete, but in a fog of confusion is, of course, an abstract meaning. So there we have a preposition used in figurative language. Now, the problem is that prepositions and adverbs often look alike, but when you look at individual sentences, you can never confuse them. Let's see. If you go to Merriam-Webster's Learner's Dictionary, for instance, you will find an entry for in, and then it will tell you what kind of, it will give you examples for each type of word class that in can belong to. And I juxtapose the entries or excerpts from the entries for preposition and adverb. We went for a swim in the lake. She went in and closed the door. I used the first example in each section. Now, how do we know when we are dealing with a preposition or an adverb? Parsing sentences helps. Let's look at these sentences. We went for a swim in the lake. We see that in the lake is a unit. In a preposition, the lake is the noun. So we see that in these example sentences under prepositions, the prepositions are always followed by a noun. And as a unit, they either act as clause elements or as modifiers inside of clause elements. Now, the adverbs are very closely attached to other verbs, and they are not followed. They don't govern nouns. For instance, she went in and closed the door. In is part of the verb phrase. Of course, we could consider it it is an obligatory adverbial of location or destination, but it's still very closely tied to the verb, and there is no noun following. We went in and closed the door. I lost my keys and now I can't get in. Same thing. So you see, when you look at these sentences, prepositions, the prepositions are always followed by or govern nouns. You know, sometimes there are constructions when the noun gets separated from the preposition that governs it, but we won't go into that here. And the adverbs modify something or are the heads of adverb phrases that function as clause elements. I will talk about the fact in a minute that prepositions and adverbs can be inside of the same construction. So be patient. I have a slide about that. So we see that prepositions don't occur on their own. They always govern nouns or noun-like things. So they either govern a noun or a noun phrase or nominal structure. Remember that gerunds are nominal structures, and so are absolute phrases or nominal clauses. Gerund constructions are sometimes called ing phrases or ing constructions or ing forms. But I don't like that because if you call them just ing forms, you can easily confuse them with prepositional, with participle constructions or participle phrases. And it's very important to tell participles and gerunds apart. But that's stuff for a different video. If you're confused by that, let me know and I'll make a video about that soon. Same thing, if you don't know what an absolute construction is, I can explain that, but not now. So we have a preposition plus a noun or a noun-like structure, and together they form a prepositional phrase. Here's a very simple example. My dog is lying on my bed. Unfortunately, my dog just passed away. I'm still heartbroken. This picture was taken 3 years ago. So my dog is lying on my bed. On my bed is the prepositional phrase. On is the preposition. My bed is the noun phrase. And the prepositional phrase on my bed is the sentence adverbial in the sentence, my dog is lying on my bed. And actually, it's an obligatory sentence adverbial. I couldn't just say my dog is lying. When I use to lie, I always need an adverbial of place. Now, prepositional phrases can function as modifiers, as clause elements, as predicate appositives, and as reduced clauses. Okay, here are examples of prep phrases as modifiers. We went for a swim in the lake. Now we went somewhere. So go always needs an adverbial of destination, a location we're going to. So for a swim in the lake is sort of a combination of destination and purpose. So we wanted to go for a swim. So because we wanted to go for a swim, we went for a swim in the lake. So we went somewhere. So the overall for a swim in the lake is a prepositional phrase, but I'm not using this prepositional phrase as an example here. I'm interested in the prepositional phrase in the lake. In the lake modifies a swim. So we didn't go for a swim in a pool, we went for a swim in the lake. And I'm sure the context of the sentence provides information about which particular lake we're talking about. And that's why there's the definite article being used here. So we went for a swim in the lake. Now, a swim in the lake is the noun phrase that's governed by the preposition for. And the prepositional phrase for a swim in the lake functions as clause element in the sentence we went for a swim in the lake. They have a house in the country. In the country is a prepositional phrase. In is the preposition. The country is the noun governed by in. In the country is the prepositional phrase modifying the noun house. So it actually has, so both in this first sentence and the second sentence, the prepositional phrases work like adjectives. They're adjectival modifiers. He is a character in a story. He's not any old character, but he is a character in a story. Not a character in a movie, but a character in a story. So again, we have a prepositional phrase functioning as adjectival modifier. He's conscious of what a fine opportunity he has. What a fine opportunity he has is a noun clause, and it's governed by the preposition of, and the prepositional phrase of what a fine opportunity he has works as an adverbial modifier of the adjective conscious. And conscious plus its prepositional phrase is an adjective phrase functioning as clause element, as predicate complement to be precise. She isn't afraid of dogs. Here we have a much simpler prepositional phrase modifying the adjective afraid. Same deal as in the previous sentence. Now, here we have what I promised you a few minutes ago. We have prepositional phrases inside of adverb phrases. So prepositional phrases can modify adverbs, and then the adverb together with its modifying prepositional phrase is an adverb phrase, and that adverb phrase can then function either as clause element or as modifier in a larger unit. Take the sentence, I stood right next to her. Next is the head adverb. It's the head of the phrase right next to her. It's modified by the prepositional phrase to her. So next to her, next. And right is an adverb modifying next, meaning exactly. So we have to her a prepositional phrase modifying an adverb. And so it's a complex structure, and together right next to her, this adverb phrase functions as adverbial of place in the sentence, I stood right next to her. To stand always needs something. It needs an adverbial of some sort. I stood there. I stood in the room. Whatever. And so here, this is an obligatory adverbial of place. Yeah, it's a complex structure. And we see that prepositional phrases can modify adverbs. They very often do. In the next example, the prepositional phrase modifies an adverb as well, but the resulting adverb phrase is an adjectival modifier of a noun. And this particular noun phrase, the house next to ours, functions as subject in the example sentence. So the house next to ours is for sale. Of course, this noun phrase, the house next to ours, could conceivably be also an object or a predicate complement, whatever. But in this particular example, it's a subject. Prep phrases can be clause elements. We've already seen that, but I wanted to provide more examples. For instance, in the sentence, Albuquerque is in New Mexico is a predicate complement. Don't come in here with your muddy boots. In here is a prep phrase of functioning as adverbial of destination. We went for a swim in the lake. I already explained that sentence. For a swim in the lake is a prepositional phrase that in turn contains another prepositional phrase. But here it's a lovely example of how, we have one sentence that contains two prepositional phrases, but one is a clause element and the other one is contained in that clause element and fulfills modifier function. It's so important to always distinguish between form and function. Okay, next example. When we came into the living room, when she came into the living room dressed, he was also dressed and had a laptop on his knees. Into the living room is an obligatory adverbial of destination, and on his knees is an optional adverbial of place. Now, in this particular sentence, it is he had a laptop is a complete sentence. Of course, in order to have the meaning that is required in this particular sentence, we semantically need on his knees. But in theory, you can have the verb have without an adverbial. I put the keys on the table. Now, on the table is a prep phrase that's actually an objective predicate, meaning that the verb to put requires two elements, a direct object, and then actually an objective predicative, so that we know where the object is placed. Prep phrases can be predicate appositives. Now, to review quickly, a predicate appositive is a non-finite or verbless predicate that has been placed alongside a finite predicate. And so it looks like a clause element, but strictly speaking, it isn't a clause element. Now remember, the implied subject of a predicate appositive always is identical with the stated subject of the clause or the structure to which the predicate appositive has been attached. It's a very important golden rule. Here are examples. Okay, I can become visible again so you know I'm still here. She returned to the house in tears. So she was in tears while she returned to the house. We have a prep phrase as second predicate appositive. We could have two sentences. She was in tears. She returned to the house. But English allows you to do a two-in-one solution. So we can actually attach the second predicate to the existing predicate, and it's very elegant. Same deal in the next sentence. They entered the house as friends. So in tears and as friends says something about the respective subject. So they were friends when they entered the house. As a true friend, he stood by me to the end. As a true friend says something about he, the subject. It predicates something about the subject. Sometimes these structures are called free modifiers. But I think it's better to consider them predicate appositives. But anyway, don't want to fight about that. But you see, as a true friend is a prep phrase. It says something about the subject, and it has been placed in initial position. Same for the next example. Among the poorest people on the continent, they were freely loading me up with provisions. Now, these types of prepositional phrases that function as predicate appositives often dangle. I hope you still remember what a dangler is. A dangler is a part of a sentence that is not properly connected to the remainder of the sentence. And I'll provide an example for you here. Hang on. The first sentence is fine. As, oh, hang on, I skipped it. As the editorial director of Hay House, I'm often asked how we acquire books. So I am the editorial director of Hay House. No, not I, but the speaker. And this person is often asked how they acquire a book. So it's a first person narrative, and the narrator says, or the speaker says, as the editorial director for Hay House, I am often asked how we acquire books. Now, this speaker is a publisher. So as a publisher, that's usually an easy answer. And here we have this dangler. Now, that is not the publisher. That, in this case, is actually, this is like it. It's a pronoun that refers to an inanimate object. So this is why the prepositional phrase is a dangler. And I'll fix this. As an experienced publisher, I can easily answer this question. Now we have the person, the publisher, both the implied subject of the prep phrase and the subject of the main clause. You can't believe how often this happens, so watch out for this. Prep phrases can be reduced clauses. After eating lunch, we went downtown. I could also say after we had eaten lunch, we went downtown, but I can reduce this clause to a prep phrase. After eating lunch, we went downtown. And after we had eaten lunch would be the adverbial subclause, functioning as adverbial, and after eating lunch is still the adverbial, but it is a reduced clause. I went home after celebrating Christmas with my family. I could have said, I went home after I had celebrated Christmas with my family. But English gives me the opportunity of reducing that adverbial subclause to a prep phrase. Even with conditions unfavorable, he would succeed. Actually, none of these sentences are of my own making. I copied them somewhere, but I actually don't remember where. So forgive me for not citing the source. Even with conditions unfavorable, he would succeed. He would succeed is the main clause. And even with conditions unfavorable is a reduction, is a reduced clause. The unabridged version would read, even when conditions were unfavorable, he would succeed. With Caesar leading the army, this is a particular prep phrase. It replaces an adverbial clause of reason or cause because Caesar was leading the army. And we have with the preposition and then Caesar leading the army is actually a nominative absolute or an absolute phrase, which is a noun-like structure, and so it can follow a preposition. Yeah, so this actually is it. This concludes my presentation of prepositions and prep phrases. I hoped it helped you. I hope it didn't overwhelm you. If you have questions, pop them below in the comment section, and I will do my best answering them. Have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video. Take good care. Bye-bye.